Recap: Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Dao, Chapter 931, Chapter. In the quiet stillness of that strange and boundless world, the assassin in black robes suddenly moved. Without warning, he thrust out a palm, sending a fierce strike toward Ling Han. Yet Ling Han did not dodge, he did not retreat. He did not even shift his stance. Instead, he stood calmly where he was, allowing the palm strike to land directly on his body as if he had been expecting it all along. His expression remained tranquil, his voice steady and composed as he spoke. "You are already within my grasp," Ling Han said slowly. "Whether you live or die now depends entirely on my will. If I wish for you to live, then you shall live. If I decide that you must die, then death will be the only road left before you." Peng! The palm strike struck him squarely, but the result was utterly unbelievable. Ling Han did not retreat even half a step. His body did not sway. To him, the attack felt no heavier than a casual tap. The black-robed assassin froze. Shock surged through him like icy lightning, causing every hair on his body to stand upright. How could this be? He blurted out. What he had just witnessed had shattered every expectation in his mind. Fear, cold, creeping fear, began to rise within his heart. Ling Han simply smiled faintly. Then he spread his arms slightly, as if presenting a grand stage. "Welcome," he said, "to my world." The assassin staggered backward several steps, disbelief flooding his eyes. This must be an illusion," he shouted. Moments earlier, he had briefly lost consciousness. That fleeting instant must have been the moment he fell into a trap. Everything he now saw, the endless sky, the strange grassland, the impossible events, surely all of it was a carefully crafted illusion. It had to be. Ling Han lifted one hand slowly and pressed downward in a calm, deliberate motion. "It seems," he said with mild regret, "that I must teach you a harsher lesson first." He sighed softly. "How strange. I'm clearly not someone who enjoys violence, yet people always seem determined to force my hand." Hong! At that moment, the heavens trembled. A colossal mountain suddenly materialized above the assassin. Before he could even react, boom! The mountain crashed down and crushed him against the ground. The weight was terrifying. The mountain seemed forged from divine metal itself, heavy beyond imagination. The assassin instantly summoned all of his strength, struggling desperately to resist the overwhelming pressure. His origin power surged through his body as he tried to push himself upward, but the mountain was too heavy, far too heavy. His body trembled violently, his bones groaned, he could barely hold on. "Ah!" A terrible scream burst from his throat. In that instant alone, more than a dozen bones in his body shattered under the crushing force. Ling Han slightly raised his hand at that moment, carefully preventing the mountain from completely flattening the man. After all, if he applied even a little more force, the assassin would be crushed into pulp. Ling Han flicked his fingers again. The black cloth covering the man's face instantly vanished. What was revealed beneath was a face so ordinary that it was almost forgettable. If such a person walked through a crowded street, no one would glance at him twice. Yet something about it was strange. Anyone who had reached the immortal realm through cultivation would naturally carry an aura that set them apart from ordinary mortals. But this man looked completely mundane. Ling Han's curiosity was instantly stirred. He sat down cross-legged on the ground in front of the crushed assassin, studying him thoughtfully. "You're an assassin, aren't you?" Ling Han said, "and you've deliberately cultivated a technique that allows you to appear completely ordinary." The black-robed man did not answer. He only howled in agony beneath the mountain's pressure. For assassins like him, torture was nothing new. Before they were even allowed to learn assassination techniques, they had to endure countless brutal trials. Only those who could withstand unimaginable torment without breaking were accepted. It was a test designed to ensure that even if they were captured, they would never betray the secrets of their organization. So although the man screamed terribly, not a single word of pleading left his lips. Ling Han smiled faintly. "Here," he said calmly, "I am a true god. In this place, there are only things I have not yet imagined. There is nothing that I cannot accomplish." He tilted his head slightly. "You endure pain quite well. In that case, let me test every punishment I can think of." And so the torment began. Ling Han continued cultivating as he worked. After all, time should never be wasted. The Black Tower was his world. Within this space he could manipulate the laws themselves. Every cut, every wound, every sensation of pain inflicted upon the assassin was magnified 100-fold. Even a tiny scratch from a small knife felt like agony that pierced through bone and spirit alike. Hours passed. Half a day later, the assassin finally broke. The man who had endured countless tortures during his training now stared forward with dull, lifeless eyes. "My name is Meng Yi," he murmured mechanically, "a junior assassin of the Dark Knight Hall." Ling Han listened calmly as the truth spilled out. Someone had issued a contract through the Dark Knight Hall. The price for Ling Han's life wasted 1,000 true origin stones, an enormous reward. And yet it had been offered merely to kill a cultivator of the Shattering Void tier. For cultivators in the Mountain River tier, even those in the early or middle levels, such a mission was laughably easy. It was practically free money. Meng Yi himself was only a low-ranking assassin. He had no knowledge of the employer's identity. He had simply been the first to accept the mission. At the time, he had considered himself lucky, but now that luck had led him straight into disaster. Ling Han stroked his chin thoughtfully. It could be the Luo clan, or Zhao Lun. It might also be the Shui clan, or perhaps someone else who envies me. He chuckled helplessly. He had only arrived in the immortal realm a few days ago, yet somehow he had already accumulated so many enemies that he could not even determine which one had hired an assassin to kill him. Was that a failure, or was it proof of success? Ling Han quickly decided on the latter. "It must be success," he said cheerfully to himself. "After all, only mediocre people escape jealousy. When so many people want to kill you, it simply proves that you are a genius." With that comforting conclusion, he exiled Meng Yi within the Black Tower. Before doing so, of course, he thoroughly searched the assassin's belongings. The total loot amounted to 164 true origin stones, 17 arrows, and 7 bottles of various alchemical pills. Ling Han frowned slightly as he examined the items. "As a Mountain River tier cultivator, why are you so poor?" he muttered, shaking his head. Even he was wealthier than this assassin. What Ling Han did not realize was that Meng Yi had spent nearly all of his wealth on those arrows. Each one had been forged from godly metal. Although the immortal realm possessed abundant godly metal, these arrows were still crafted from level 1 godly metal, making them extremely expensive. Combined with the cost of the alchemical pills he carried, it was actually remarkable that Meng Yi still had over 100 true origin stones remaining. After all, even a genius like Ling Han only received 2 true origin stones per month from the Scarlet Heaven Academy. With the interrogation complete, Ling Han left the Black Tower and returned to the Academy. This time, the Dark Knight Hall had failed in their assassination attempt, but such organizations never gave up easily. The next assassin would surely be stronger. Perhaps a middle-level assassin. Perhaps a high-level assassin. Perhaps even a copper-plated assassin. From Meng Yi, Ling Han had learned much about the Dark Knight Hall. It was an enormous organization whose influence spread across nearly every empire and city. Their assassins were divided into 6 ranks, from lowest to highest: junior level, middle level, high level, copper-plated, silver-plated, gold-plated. However, these ranks were not determined by cultivation level. Instead, they were based on how many targets the assassin had successfully killed, and how powerful those targets had been. The more enemies an assassin eliminated, and the stronger those enemies were, the higher their rank would become. Thus, it was entirely possible for a middle-level assassin to be stronger than a copper-plated one. Still, generally speaking, the higher an assassin's rank, the more dangerous they were. Ling Han sighed and scratched his head. "It's not a good feeling being constantly hunted," he muttered. "But what can I do?" At the moment, he had no solution. The only option was to remain cautious. After returning to the academy, Ling Han cast aside these worries and immersed himself in cultivation. After all, the Dark Knight Hall would not dare act recklessly within the imperial capital, and besides, he possessed the Black Tower. His life was not yet truly in danger. 3 days later, Ling Han received a summons from the left minister. The grand competition between the 3 empires was about to begin. The Chaotic Star's majestic empire needed to finalize the candidates who would represent them in the arena battles. This event was of immense importance. Not only would the Chaotic Star's majestic empire send its own geniuses, but even the royal empires under its rule were sending their finest talents. Every empire wished to prove its strength. After all, if the chaotic star's majestic empire performed poorly, every subordinate empire would share the embarrassment. Glory for one meant glory for all. Disgrace for one meant disgrace for all. Ling Han first travelled to the left minister's residence. From there, the left minister personally escorted him to the residence of the ninth king. The ninth king bore the surname Hu and the name Feiyun. She was one of the 9 kings of the chaotic star's majestic empire. Her authority stretched across the entire empire. Yet what made her position astonishing was this. Hu Feiyun was only a cultivator in the middle levels of the mountain river tier. The 9 kings held authority above even the left and right ministers and the 7 great generals. So how could someone with such modest cultivation command such respect? The answer was simple. She was under the direct protection of the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. 700,000 years ago, the empire had once possessed an 8th general. At that time, there were only 7 kings. The 7th king, who ranked last among them, was also merely a mountain river tier cultivator. That general had looked down on her. Worse still, he had dared to behave improperly toward her. The Empress's response was swift and terrifying. Her fury shook the heavens. With a single move, she crushed the general to death. Immediately afterward, his entire clan was wiped out. From that moment onward, no one dared disrespect the 9 kings, because the Empress had declared one simple truth. To see the 9 kings was the same as seeing her. The manor of the 9th king had transformed into a place of thunderous activity. Voices rose and fell like waves crashing upon a shore, and the entire estate seemed alive with anticipation. It was not merely a gathering. It was the convergence of ambition, power, and destiny. The left minister had arrived. The right minister had arrived. Event the 7 great generals of the empire had come in person. Each of these towering figures had brought with them a handful of personally selected elites. Young cultivators they believed possessed the potential to represent the chaotic star's majestic empire in the grand competition that occurred once every decade. But they were not the only ones who had gathered. Officials from various government departments hurried back and forth like anxious ants, seeking hidden talents across the empire. Their mission was simple yet monumental: to discover the most exceptional cultivators the empire could offer before the approaching contest. And beyond the borders of the empire itself, representatives from subordinate royal empires had also arrived, each bringing along their own prodigies and geniuses. For these young talents, the opportunity was extraordinary. If one of them could represent the chaotic star's majestic empire in the upcoming battles, it would be a glory beyond measure. And if they could lead the empire's representatives to seize first place, the reward from the Empress herself would be unimaginably generous. The Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was no ordinary sovereign. To the people of the empire, she was sacred and virtuous. To countless admirers, she was the dream lover who existed beyond reach. To cultivators across the land, she was the ultimate idol, the embodiment of the highest peak of power and cultivation. The gathering took place within a grand garden inside the 9th king's manor. Temporary chairs had been arranged neatly across the open space, yet the arrangement itself clearly reflected the rigid hierarchy of the empire. Only the highest-ranking figures, the ministers, generals, and great officials, were permitted to sit. The younger cultivators, including those at the Shattering Void tier like Ling Han, could only stand respectfully around the perimeter, and the number of participants was astonishing. There were well over 100 cultivators who had reached the Shattering Void tier. Yet despite the massive crowd, the brutal truth remained unchanged. In the end, only 10 people would be chosen. Only 10 cultivators would be granted the honor of representing the Chaotic Star's majestic empire in the upcoming competition. The rivalry was destined to be fierce. Among the spectators wandering through the garden was Li Weiwei. She had come purely to enjoy the spectacle. However, her identity alone made it impossible for her to remain unnoticed. As the daughter of the left minister, her status was extraordinary. Endless young men gathered around her, smiling politely, trying to strike up conversations. After all, if someone could marry the daughter of the left minister, their future would soar like a phoenix ascending to the heavens. Ling Han, meanwhile, had no interest in the social commotion. He found a quiet rock in a corner of the garden and casually sat down. His eyes slowly closed. Within his body, the 6 techniques, returned to one, began circulating. Though the spiritual energy in the garden was far from ideal for cultivation, Ling Han still seized every moment he could. For someone walking the path of cultivation, time itself was treasure. Even wasting a single breath of time was unacceptable. Just then, "Ha! With me, Yang Zi, present today, the Chaotic Star's majestic empire will definitely claim first place in this competition." A loud and confident voice rang through the garden. A sturdy young man stepped forward. His chest puffed out proudly as he declared his confidence to the entire gathering. His voice immediately drew curious whispers. "Who is that?" someone nearby quietly asked. "Oh, him?" another replied. "He's from the Black Flame Nation, just a country fellow, really, but his strength is quite impressive. He has reached 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier." Hiss! The surrounding cultivators collectively sucked in cold air. 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. Within the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, and even across the entire Joint Peace planet, such strength stood near the very summit. Few could ever reach such a level. Even though Luoba and Ye Chengyun had once possessed battle prowess of 21 stars, and Ling Han had been capable of killing them instantly. For the average cultivator present, 20 stars was already an almost unreachable peak. Naturally, Yang Zi immediately became the focus of countless eyes. At that moment, Ma Xing walked toward Ling Han. Like Ling Han, he had also been selected by officials as a potential representative for the competition. After all, cultivators who possessed King's Qi were extremely rare. Standing beside Ling Han, Ma Xing glanced toward the seated ministers and generals and muttered with dissatisfaction. "They're all sitting comfortably, eating food and enjoying themselves, while we're forced to stand here." His tone carried obvious displeasure. The they he referred to naturally meant the left minister and the other powerful figures seated comfortably at the front. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh quietly. He had never expected that Ma Xing would complain about something so trivial in such an important gathering. This man truly was an odd character. Even in a situation like this, what occupied his thoughts was food. Just as the murmurs of the crowd continued to ripple through the garden, a clear and authoritative voice suddenly echoed across the space. "The 9th King arrives." The announcement came from a female servant. Her voice was firm, loud, and carried tremendous force. It rolled across the garden like thunder. More astonishingly, this servant herself was an elite at the Sun Moon tier. Immediately, everyone present stood up. Even the left minister, the right minister, and the 7 great generals rose to their feet without hesitation. The reason was simple. The Empress herself had once declared that encountering the 9 kings was equivalent to encountering her. Therefore, when the 9th king appeared, it was as if the Empress herself had arrived. Who would dare remain seated? All eyes turned toward the garden entrance, and then she appeared. Walking gracefully through the garden gate was a young woman dressed in flowing purple robes. She looked no older than 18 or 19. Her long skirt fit perfectly against her figure, accentuating the elegant curves of her body. Her beauty was extraordinary. Even when compared with Shui Yanyu, she was not the slightest bit inferior. Yet there was something unexpected about her demeanor. She seemed shy. As the focus of countless gazes fell upon her, a blush quickly spread across her delicate face. Her cheeks turned a soft crimson. There was a trace of nervousness in her expression. Reaching the central host's seat, she raised her hands slightly and spoke. "Spare me their formalities, all the L-Lords." Her voice stuttered slightly. Ling Han couldn't help smiling. The 9th king possessed a status so noble that even the left minister had to bow respectfully before her. And yet, she behaved like a shy young woman easily flustered by attention. It was rather amusing. Despite her shy demeanor, however, none of the ministers dared show the slightest disrespect. The left minister and the others bowed once more before finally taking their seats again. For cultivators of their level, a span of 700,000 years was nothing more than the blink of an eye. Who would want to anger the royal authority and risk the possibility of the 7 great generals suddenly becoming 6? Or the left and right ministers being reduced to a single minister? After everyone settled down, the ninth king spoke again. There are still half a month before the competition between the three empires begins. Her voice had grown steadier. Though her cheeks were still faintly red, she no longer stuttered. Today, we will select the 10 representatives who will participate in the competition on behalf of our empire. She paused briefly before continuing. I, under the command of Big Sister. She suddenly froze, her face turned bright red. Ah! Under the command of Her Imperial Majesty, she corrected hurriedly. I am responsible for choosing the 10 geniuses who will represent our empire. Her earlier slip had revealed something important. The 9 kings addressed the Empress as their elder sister, and they had never attempted to conceal this relationship. That familial bond was precisely why the 9 kings possessed such elevated status within the empire. Then, let us begin. At her command, servants quickly carried 10 chairs into the center of the garden and arranged them in an open space. The rules were simple. Time limit, 2 hours. After 2 hours had passed, the 10 people seated in those chairs would be chosen as the empire's representatives. The method of selection was even simpler. Fight for the chairs. Though battles would take place directly within the garden, the elites seated nearby were powerful enough to control any shockwaves produced during combat. With a single thought, they could suppress the after effects of battle. Not even the slightest damage would reach the surroundings. For a moment, however, no one moved. Everyone understood the same thing. Those who occupied the chairs first would inevitably become the primary targets. They would face endless challenges. They might even be attacked by multiple opponents simultaneously. Why rush to sit down now? It would be far wiser to wait until the 2-hour limit was nearly over before making a move. At that moment, cowards! All of you! Yang Zi stepped forward boldly. Without hesitation, he strode toward the first chair. Hold it! Ma Xing suddenly leapt forward. I quite like that seat, he said casually. Why don't you choose another one? Clearly, he disliked Yang Zi's arrogant attitude. Yang Zi chuckled. Kaka, perhaps you should pick a different seat instead. Before finishing his sentence, Yang Zi suddenly moved. His hand shot forward like a claw, aiming straight at Ma Xing. Ma Xing's eyes flashed with anger. At that instant, the aura of King's Qi erupted from his body. The moment their attacks collided, images of divine beasts appeared within the air, intertwining and roaring with terrifying force. Peng, peng, peng! The 2 cultivators instantly clashed. Ma Xing's own battle strength was only 19 stars. However, once his King's Qi was unleashed, his power surged dramatically. He was no weaker than Yang Zi, who possessed 20 stars of battle prowess. The 2 fighters quickly became locked in a stalemate. Seeing the battle begin, the other cultivators hesitated only briefly before rushing toward the remaining chairs. The struggle for seats had begun. Amid the chaotic clashes, however, Ling Han remained completely unmoved. In truth, even if every shattering void-tier cultivator present attacked him together, they would still be no match for him. Even if he fought with only one arm, there was simply no need for him to join the commotion. Instead, he calmly closed his eyes again and rested quietly in the corner. His plan was simple. Wait until the 2-hour limit was almost reached. Then casually take any remaining seat. Just then, a soft voice suddenly echoed in his ear. Ling Han, are you not going to act? Though the voice was extremely quiet, it did not enter through his ears. Instead, it was transmitted directly into his mind. The sound struck his consciousness like thunder. It was the voice of the left minister. Ling Han opened his eyes and glanced toward the minister. Yet the left minister appeared completely indifferent, as if he had not spoken at all. Clearly, Ling Han's relaxed attitude had displeased him. The message had been a warning. Ling Han sighed inwardly. It seemed he could no longer remain idle. Very well. He slowly stood up. As he walked forward, he casually rolled his shoulders and stretched his arms like someone warming up before exercise. If he was going to participate, he might as well make a grand entrance. A faint smile appeared on his lips. Ling Han raised his right hand. Within his palm, a terrifying force began condensing. At that instant, all the powerful figures seated nearby turned their gazes toward him. Every pair of eyes focused on Ling Han.